This is how your notes should be set up for section 8-4, factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. How do you factor a trinomial when a is greater than 1? Throughout the video, I'll explain how to do that, and I also want you to be able to answer this question when you come to class tomorrow. I want to remind you to pause the video, write down this entire slide, and then replay when you're ready to follow along. Let's go ahead and recall multiplying binomials. When you multiply 3x plus 2 by 2x plus 5, the coefficient of the x squared term is the product of the coefficients of the x terms. So what they're talking about is looking at 6, you'll notice that 3 and 2 are the product, of the factor form of 6. So 3 times 2 would give you 6. Also, the constant term in the trinomial is the product of the constants in the binomial. So here, 2 and 5 give you the product of 10, and that is the constant term in the trinomial. This is just something you should notice when we multiplied in chapter 7, and now we're going to work our way backwards. We're going to go from this trinomial to the factored form. But notice the similarities. Back in the day when I was in high school and had to learn algebra and we were factoring trinomials, we would use the long way to factor a trinomial in this form, and that's when a equals 1. So when this a term is greater than 1, I said equals, but I meant greater. When the a term is greater than 1, you can use guess and check. So this is really just the extremely long way of factoring a trinomial. So let's look at the trinomial 6x squared plus 11x plus 4. Well, in order to factor it, we have to look at the 6, which is the a term, and that will give us our answers here in front of the x and here in front of the x. And notice all the blue terms have all the different possibilities to get 6 once you multiply. And then you also want to look at the constant term. So that's going to be the red term, which is 4 in this case, and that will give us this second part of the binomials for our factored form. And notice these are the different forms of the number 4. So you could try different variations of the blue and the red to figure out which one is your answer. So you're going to guess, and the part that I'm talking about guessing for is this part. You guess by creating different combinations, and then you check by multiplying using the x method or distributive property. And if you get the exact trinomial back, that's this answer in black, then it is your factored form. But if you don't, then it's not it. So that's what these x's represent. They represent all of these different combinations that don't work. And then the last combination, the last guess that we tried does work. And 3 and 2 would have been the best choice along with 4 and 1. And if you multiply, you'll get the same answer back. So that's what all this information explains on the slide, but we are not going to do it that way. It takes too long, and it's not very useful for us and what we want to do in class. So I'm going to show you how to use the big X method instead of the long way. But you are more than welcome to copy down this information so you have another way of factoring a trinomial. So this way does work, it just takes a while to do. So here's an outline of how we can use the big X method to factor trinomials in this form, ax squared plus bx plus c, when a is greater than 1. Remember, when a equals 1, the a term is not there, but when it's greater than 1, you'll see the number in front of the x squared. And so this gives you just an outline of how we're going to use the big X method. Up top, you're going to have what we add to, and that's going to be the b term, which is the middle term. And it's always the coefficient in front of the x term. This is the same exact thing as we do for the x method. Then you're going to take the product of a and c, so that means we multiply when I say product, and you'll write that in the bottom portion of the x, and that is what you're going to multiply to. So you're going to look for factors of ac that will multiply here to ac and add to the b. Once you have those terms, you'll write them here in the question marks, and they can be positive or negative. And this is what's going to be really different from the X method. Now you're going to divide both of the factors by a, the leading coefficient, and that will help us to draw it in our skeleton. And notice this is our skeleton. We have the boxes where you're going to have the numbers depending upon what trinomial you're going to factor. So I have 3 examples for us to practice that include positives and negatives. Here's our first example. We are going to factor the trinomial. I didn't mean to do that. We are going to factor the trinomial, and then you are going to go ahead and check your answer on your own. Okay, and that means you're going to use the box method or the distributive property to check your work. So up top is what we're going to add to, and I believe I had that in red from the last slide. So that is going to be 11, which is our B term. And then what we multiply to is going to be factor of 6, or excuse me, the product of 6 and 3. So 6 multiplied by 3 is 18. And this is what we're multiplying to. So now on the side, kind of like my scratch paperwork, I need to think of factors for 18 that will add up to 11. So let's list our factors. 1 times 18, 3 times 6, 2 times 9. And that gives us all our factors of 18. And let's see which one could give us the addition, or excuse me, the sum or difference of 11. See, 1 and 18 will not work. That would only give me 17 or 16. 3 and 6 would give me 9 or 3, so that wouldn't work. And 2 and 9 would give me 11 or 7, and it could give us 11. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my factors as 2 and 9. And now I'll divide them by the leading coefficient, which is 6. Okay, so I'll put a big circle around that. There we go. So divide both by 6. And then this entire school year, I have been practicing with you on how to reduce, and I told you always simplify your answer. It came in handy when we worked on slope, and now it will come in handy when we have to simplify this answer. So here we're going to simplify, and I'll try to keep it color-coded so it can help us put it into our skeleton correctly. So one number goes into 2 and 6 evenly. 2 will, so I get 1. Because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I just reduced that fraction, and then I reduced the second one. So 3 would go in the top and bottom evenly. 3 divided by 9, or excuse me, 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now they're in the stripless form. I'm going to write them in my skeleton, and so this is where the color coding is going to come in handy. Your denominator will always go first. So I have 3x, and then your numerator will go second, and since it's positive, I will put plus 1. And that's my first factored binomial. And now for the second part, I'll take the 2, which is my denominator, and that goes first. So I get 2x, and then 3 is in the numerator, which will go second, and since it's positive, I'll put plus 3. And now on your own, you will multiply and make sure that we get this trinomial back by using the X method, or excuse me, the box method or distributive property. Just a side note, this method that I'm using to show you was taught to me by a student I tutored a few years ago, and they learned that from their teacher, and I thought it was the best way to factor a trinomial, because no matter what, as long as you use the correct method and do the method correctly, you will get the correct answer. So go ahead and make sure you double check, okay, and make sure I had the correct one. Okay, here is my second example. If you feel like you got it after this example, you don't need to watch the rest of the video because the video will go over 10 minutes. But if you feel like you need a third example, then stay tuned for the next one. So let's go ahead and finish example number 2. We are going to what we're going to add to will go up top, and that was in red. So that is my middle term, and this time it's a negative 16. And then what I multiplied to goes in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply 3 times 16, and I get 48. 3 and 16, that gives us 48. And this is what we're multiplying to. So now I'm going to go and list my factors of 48. Factors of 48, could be 6 times 8, 2 times 24. Can you think of any factors, other factors of 48? How about 3 and 16? Good. Other factors of 48 would be 4 and 12. Okay, let's check our list and see if any of these would give us 16. There might be some more factors of 48, but I think we might have it here. So 6 plus 8 would not give me 16. Give me 14, or if I subtract it, give me 2. Here, 2 and 24 would not work. That would give me 22 or 26. 3 and 16 would give me 19 or 13. I mean, that's close. I got a 16 there, but it won't. The sum or difference won't give me the 16. And then we got 4 and 12. We'll see if we add those two together, we would get 16. So those would work. So I'd have 4 and 12. And I want you to notice that, oops, I forgot to write it in black. I want you to notice that we want the sum to be negative 16. So that means both factors will have to be negative. So when I multiply them, I get positive 48. Next, I divide them by the leading coefficient, the LC. Put a star next to it. That way you remember it's always the leading coefficient. So divide by 3. And then reduce if I can. As you can see on the first factor here, I can't reduce. This is the simplest form. But on the second one, I can. And I can divide the top and bottom by 3 and get negative 4 over 3. And now I'll write it in my factored form. So denominator, oops, I completely reduced incorrectly. That should have been a 1, right? Okay, now let's go ahead and put it in factored form. So I get 3x, and since that's a negative 4, notice I kept the negative up top. It becomes a minus 4 here in my binomial. And then the second part will give me the 3 first. Oops, excuse me. Can't believe I just did that. That was incorrect. Okay, there we go. It's going to give me 1. I keep forgetting that 1. So notice even I can make mistakes. So now I get 1x, which I could just put x, right? And then minus 4. And now what I want you to notice is look at 3x times x gives me the 3x squared. And then negative 4 times negative 4 gives me positive 16. But I'll need to check my answer to make sure I get negative 16x in the middle when I simplify. Here's our third and final example. Just a reminder, you don't have to watch this example if you understand it'll pass too. But if you like some additional practice or some additional help, then you should be completing this example with me. So we're going to go ahead and draw our x. And now I'm going to show you what to do when your constant is negative. And so this can get a little tricky, so make sure you follow your negatives correctly. What we have up top is what we're going to add to. That's always your middle term, so that's going to be my 9. And I shouldn't circle the 9x. I should just circle the 9 because it's the b term. It's in front. It's what's in front of the x that's important. What I multiply to will be the factor of 2 times negative 18, and that will give me negative 36. And this is what I'll be multiplying to. So on my side, I can list out my factors of 36. And factors of 36 would be 1 times 36, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, or 2 times 18. And let's see, we have 4. Let's see which one would work. 1 and 36 wouldn't work. 3 and 12, yeah, if I add those, I get 15. If I subtract, I get 9, and that's what I want. Let's just double check. 4 and 9 wouldn't work. That would give 13 and 5. 2 and 18, if I added those, it would give me 30, if I added, give me 20. If I subtract, give me 16. So that wouldn't work. So the best choice is 3 and 12. 3 and 12. And we have a negative product. So that means one number must be negative. And since I want the sum to be positive, the bigger number needs to be positive and the smaller number can be negative. Then I'll divide both by the LC, leading coefficient. Put a star there. Divide by 2, divide by 2. And I'll reduce if I can. I noticed that for the first one I can't, but for the second factor I can. Divide both by 2, so I get positive 6 and positive 1. Okay, now I'll write them in factored form and keep it color-coded. 2 goes first. I'll write it down here. So I get 2x and then minus 3. And then for the second one, oops, I want to definitely just keep drawing arrows to help. Second one's going to be the 1. So I get 1x, or just x, right? I don't need to write the 1. And then it's going to be a positive 6, so plus 6. And I want you to check your answer by multiplying, but let's double check to see if we're correct with our factors for the two binomials. 2x times x would give me 2x squared, and negative 3 times positive 6 would give me negative 18. Then I would multiply and make sure that the middle term becomes 9x. Okay. Bring your questions to class and make sure to check all 3 examples.